The Marina was everything Madison had come to expect from her high society upbringing. It gleamed in the late afternoon sun, rows of polished yachts bobbing gently against their moorings, their white sails catching the breeze like the wings of birds about to take flight. Her parents, dressed in their best for the farewell cruise, stood near the Marina office, talking in low tones. Her mother, Loretta, always impeccably put together, adjusted her wide-brimmed hat, her fingers still manicured to perfection. Madison's father, Dr. Andrew Lynn, was busy chatting with the Marina staff, his usual air of detached authority in full force. But Madison wasn't thinking about the elegance of their surroundings or the upcoming trip to the Galapagos. She wasn't even thinking about the expense, the high-end hotel reservations, the luxury yacht that would take them across the world to some of the most beautiful, pristine places on Earth. She was thinking about Grandma June. At 85, June had become a shadow of the woman she used to be. Once a respected marine biologist, now slowly losing herself to the cruel grips of dementia. She sat on a worn bench by the docks, watching the boats as if waiting for something, her hands gripping a small framed photo of her late husband, Arthur, as though it were the last tether keeping her anchored in the world. Madison had tried to talk to her earlier, asking if she was excited about the trip, but June's reply had been a muddled ramble about Arthur and the ocean, disconnected from the reality Madison was trying to create. She'd always been so sharp, so full of life. This slow slip into confusion had unsettled Madison in ways she hadn't expected. But even as her heart ached for her grandmother, her loyalty to her parents, who insisted June didn't need anything but a little rest and relaxation, kept her silent. At least that had been the plan. "Mom, Dad, are you ready?" Madison called across the parking lot, trying to sound casual, though the words were thick in her throat. She was eager to get June on the boat. They'd planned this trip together, after all. Loretta turned, her smile bright but thin, as if her face had been rehearsed 100 times in the mirror that morning. "We're just going to check in with the Marina office. Why don't you grab June some water from the car?" "We won't be long." Madison glanced back at her grandmother, still sitting motionless on the bench, oblivious to the bustle around her. "I'll stay with her," Madison offered, her words more instinctive than planned. Her mother waved a dismissive hand. "No need. It's just a minute, Maddie. Besides, we need to finalize the boarding arrangements." There was a tone in her voice that made Madison pause. She didn't push. She never pushed. But as her parents disappeared into the office, a nagging suspicion twisted in Madison's gut. It wasn't like her parents to take this long with something so simple. They'd been so organized in their plans for the trip, so meticulous in every detail. Why were they suddenly so distracted? With a frown, she turned back to the bench where June sat. The old woman was humming softly now, the tune one Madison remembered from her childhood. Something about the sea, a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her on countless summer nights. The sound was strangely soothing, but it only made Madison's unease grow. She watched as her grandmother rocked slightly, staring out at the boats, the lines of her face soft, serene, but distant. Madison turned toward the Marina office. Maybe she should just go check on them. But before she could take a step, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, distracted by the sudden flash of an incoming message. It was a notification from the Marina app. She tapped it, expecting some routine update on her family's booking. What she found instead stopped her cold. "Thank you for your reservation. Your family has successfully checked in and boarded the yacht. We wish you a pleasant voyage." Her heart stuttered. "Number." There had to be a mistake. She blinked at the screen, her fingers frozen over the phone. They'd boarded? Already? Without her? Without June? Her stomach lurched. Number. That couldn't be right. She hadn't even heard them say goodbye. Panic surged, and she bolted toward the Marina office, her feet hitting the pavement harder now, her thoughts racing. She pushed through the glass doors, eyes scanning for her parents, but they weren't there. She spotted the clerk behind the counter, casually flipping through papers. "Excuse me," she said, voice shaking. "My family, Andrew Lynn, Loretta Lynn, are they still here?" The clerk looked up, then down at the computer screen. "Oh yes, they boarded earlier today." Madison's knees almost gave out beneath her, the room tilting. "Boarded? Without me? Without my grandmother?" The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Miss Lynn. They were on the list." Her mind reeled. There was no way. There had to be some mistake. She turned sharply, heading for the exit. Her eyes locked on the spot where she'd left June. Grandma was still there. But now Madison was certain. Her parents had left, and they hadn't even told her. They'd left her behind, like an afterthought. She rushed back to June, trying to steady her breath. "Grandma, we need to go," she whispered urgently, but June didn't respond. She just hummed quietly, still clutching the picture of Arthur. Madison's throat tightened. She didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the look in her grandmother's eyes. The old woman, so full of stories and life, had been discarded in favor of something more convenient, something that didn't require the burden of care or compassion. Tears blurred Madison's vision as she pulled June to her feet. "We're going to get you out of here," she whispered, the words barely audible. But as they started walking toward the parking lot, her mind was already spiraling, racing through the implications of what her parents had done. What had they planned? She didn't know yet, but something inside her was shifting. Her entire world felt suddenly small, suffocating under the weight of the choices made for her. And the worst part? She knew she'd never be the same. Growing up in Newport Beach, Madison's life was built on perfection. At least that was how her parents saw it. Their sprawling estate, a place of clean lines and even cleaner surfaces, reflected every value they held dear: appearance, discipline, success. She was just the right child, the model of their ideal. Her father, Dr. Andrew Lynn, was a prominent neurosurgeon whose every move commanded respect, and her mother, Loretta, a polished socialite who made sure everyone knew it, was always at his side, perfectly composed. Madison had been their golden child, the one who never made waves, never sought attention. It was simple, really. If you stayed silent, did what was expected, and made them proud, you would be accepted. Her life had been designed with precision, her every step measured, her every word rehearsed. Her father would sit in his study for hours, reviewing medical journals or making rounds at the hospital. And he expected the same from Madison: focus, excellence, and silence. "Failure is not an option," he would say, his voice low and serious. Every B, every small misstep was a personal affront to him, even if he didn't say it aloud. Madison learned early on that perfection was the price of his love. Her mother, too, had an invisible weight that pressed down on her. As a socialite, Loretta's life was about appearances, about being seen with the right people, wearing the right clothes. She barely spoke to Madison unless it was in public, offering compliments when it was convenient, or silence when it wasn't. Madison's success at school, her academic awards, her perfect behavior, were all tools to present a flawless family image, not signs of her own effort or growth. The day Madison received her first straight A report card, her mother smiled faintly. "You're so lucky," she had said, brushing a strand of hair from Madison's face as she sipped her wine. "But remember, being the best isn't about being happy. It's about being impressive." That smile felt hollow to Madison, but she didn't know how to react. She just nodded, trying to understand why the people who should love her the most only seemed to care about what she could offer to their carefully constructed image. But in the midst of the high-performance expectations and emotional suppression, there was one person who had always made Madison feel seen, truly seen: her grandmother, June. Grandma June wasn't like the rest of the family. She had a wildness about her, a quiet rebellion that Madison admired and clung to. June was the one who sneaked her away from the rigid walls of the Lynn household for tide pool walks at the beach. "The ocean is always changing," she would say with a smile. "You should too. Don't let anyone pin you down." June taught her about constellations late at night, under the vast, star-filled sky. They would sit together, June's arm around Madison's shoulders, pointing out the constellations. "Look there, that's Orion," Grandma June would say. "He's a hunter, but he's always looking for his next adventure." Her grandmother didn't care what anyone thought about her or about Madison. June didn't fit into the world of high society or the family's obsession with success. She didn't care for polished appearances or social status. She cared about the small moments, about the things that truly mattered: family, connection, and living freely. In those rare moments when it was just the two of them, Madison felt more herself than anywhere else in her life. June didn't expect her to be perfect. She only expected her to be present. But as time passed, things began to change. June's presence in the Lynn household faded, slowly at first, like the tide receding. Madison watched as her parents isolated June, moving her into the guest house under the guise of giving her space. June's books, her marine biology texts, and the mementos of a long career in oceanography were removed from the living room shelves. The photos of her travels disappeared from the walls. Madison's heart broke every time she saw another part of Grandma June being erased from the family's home. When she returned from college for visits, she found more and more locked doors, vague excuses, and a grandmother who became more confused with each passing day. June's memory would flicker in and out, and sometimes she would call Madison by a name that wasn't hers, Arthur's name, or even her own mother's name. But there were moments, like when they were on the beach together, that Madison still saw glimpses of the woman who had taught her to love the ocean and all its mysteries. One evening, during one of her brief visits, June looked at her with wide, searching eyes. "When they forget I'm here, promise me you won't," she whispered, her voice trembling. The simple promise hit Madison harder than she expected. She didn't fully understand what June meant, but in that moment, she knew something deep in her gut was about to shift. As the years passed, Madison grew more aware of the distance between herself and the woman who had once been her world. Her grandmother, June, was slowly fading, not just in health, but in the household. What had once been a vibrant presence in the Lynn family home became a whisper, fading into the background as Madison's parents continued their silent erasure. It started with small things, unnoticed by most. Grandma's marine biology books, which had once lined the shelves in the living room, were moved to a dusty corner of the guest house. Her collection of seashells, a gift for Madison from their many beach walks, was packed away in boxes labeled for storage. Each memento of her life's work seemed to disappear piece by piece, as if her parents were quietly convincing themselves, and Madison, that June no longer mattered. The guest house, once a welcoming space for June, had become her prison. Each time Madison visited, she found the door locked, the curtains drawn. Her grandmother had been isolated, confined to the small space, where the smell of old books and the soft creak of floorboards were the only company. Madison had always known that this was coming. Dementia didn't wait for permission, but it was the silence that broke her. In the beginning, Madison tried to visit regularly, to bring June outside for short walks or trips to the local pier. But over time, it became harder. Her parents' excuses grew more elaborate. "Grandma's too tired today. She needs to rest. She's not in the mood for visitors." The isolation deepened. When Madison returned from college, the locked doors and vague explanations became a routine. Even when she did manage to sit with her grandmother, it was clear that June wasn't the same woman who had taught her about constellations or walked her down tide pools. One afternoon, during a visit, Madison sat across from June, trying to coax her to eat lunch. June didn't respond. She just stared at her hands, lost in thoughts of another time. Madison reached over, gently lifting June's hands into her own, trying to bring her back. "Grandma," Madison said softly, "do you remember the time we watched the stars together? Do you remember Orion?" June's eyes flickered. A slight spark of recognition lit her face for a moment before it dimmed. She hummed a tune, the same lullaby she used to sing to Madison when she was a little girl, but the words didn't come. Madison swallowed the lump in her throat. "I remember," she whispered, more to herself than to June. The woman who had been her constant, her grounding force, was slipping further away, and Madison had to sit there, helpless, as her grandmother's memories faded into the fog. But Madison had a promise to keep, a promise made in the quiet moments of their time together. That night, as Madison prepared to leave the guest house, June whispered something that stopped her in her tracks. "When they forget I'm here, promise me you won't," June said, her voice barely audible. Madison froze. She hadn't heard June speak with such clarity in weeks. She leaned closer, her heart pounding. "Promise me you won't forget," June repeated, her hands trembling as she held out the small photo of Arthur, her late husband, tightly to Madison. Tears welled up in Madison's eyes, but she nodded, squeezing her grandmother's hand. "I won't forget, Grandma. I promise." But as she walked out of the guest house, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Promise me you won't forget." Madison had never realized how much of her own life she'd sacrificed for the approval of her parents, how much she'd let slip away in her pursuit of their validation. The more she witnessed the erasure of June from their lives, the more she questioned everything she thought she understood about family and loyalty. Madison had always known that her family operated in ways that made her uncomfortable. Her father, Dr. Andrew Lynn, was a neurosurgeon, renowned for his surgical precision and cold efficiency. But he expected the same from everyone around him, especially his family. Loretta, her mother, was a polished socialite, her every movement curated for appearances. And Madison, for most of her life, had been the obedient daughter, silent, disciplined, and always striving to meet their high expectations. But as she sat in the large, darkened living room, listening to her father on the phone, her unease grew. He was speaking to someone, his voice clipped and commanding. It wasn't the usual medical jargon. This was something else, something Madison hadn't expected to overhear. Bypassing her, of course, it's easier that way, her father was saying, his words crisp with authority. She'll fall in line, she always does. Just make sure the signatures are in place before the next trip. We don't want her asking questions. Madison's stomach turned. She knew the conversation had to do with her, but the words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. Her father, the man who had always prided himself on his control, was making plans without her. She was the obedient daughter, the one who never asked questions, the one who always complied. But this time, her gut told her there was more at play than what was being said. She felt a rush of anger and confusion flood her veins. For the first time in years, she stepped out from the shadow of the Lynn family's expectations and walked down the hallway towards the study where her father was still on the phone. She stood at the threshold for a moment, her body tense, her mind racing. She had overheard enough to know what was happening. Her father was making decisions for her, bypassing her as if she were a child again. And what was worse, he assumed she'd just fall in line. When she stepped into the study, Dr. Lynn glanced up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before his usual mask of composure slipped back into place. "Madison," he said, his voice cool. "I didn't realize you were home. Everything all right?" "Are you really going behind my back with legal transfers?" she asked, her voice steady but seething with disbelief. "What's going on, Dad?" Her father's face remained impassive. "Madison, you're being dramatic," he said, his tone dismissive as he set the phone down. "This is just business. We need to ensure everything is in order before the family trip. You'll understand when the time comes." Her mind whirled. "A family trip?" she repeated, her chest tightening with a new suspicion. "You mean the yacht trip to the Galapagos? The one you planned without telling me anything about?" "Doctor." Lynn's expression hardened slightly, the flicker of annoyance barely perceptible. "It's not about you, Madison. We're doing this for your grandmother, for her well-being." Madison fought the urge to lash out. "For her well-being? You don't even see her. You've barely spoken to her in months, and now you're telling me you're going to take her on a farewell cruise. But it's not about me?" Loretta entered the room then, smoothing her silk blouse with a practiced motion. Now, Madison, calm down," she said, her voice thin with the kind of practiced sweetness that always grated on Madison's nerves. "You know how important this trip is. We want to create some final memories before things get harder with June. It's a nice gesture." The word gesture struck Madison like a slap in the face. It wasn't a gesture. It was manipulation, plain and simple. She had seen her parents control everything about her life, from the way she was raised to the choices she was allowed to make. But now, they were controlling June's life too. Madison wasn't going to stand for it. "No, this is about you," Madison spat. "This is about your image. You've been erasing Grandma's memory from this house, and now you're using her as a prop for your perfect vacation." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "You're being emotional, Madison. This is just a trip, something nice for everyone. We want to enjoy the last few good days with June before things get difficult for her." Madison's throat constricted. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. This wasn't about June at all. It was about the Lynn family's need to control everything, to present a perfect image to the world. And June, the woman who had loved Madison unconditionally, who had been the only one to show her warmth, was being used as a tool in their game. "I won't be a part of this," Madison said, the words sharp as glass. "I won't let you erase Grandma like this." Her father's eyes flashed with impatience. "Madison, you're being naive. You don't understand the bigger picture. We're doing what's best for her." "What's best for her?" Madison repeated, feeling her anger rise. "You know what's best for her? Letting her live her last years with dignity, letting her have her memories, not throwing her on a yacht like some afterthought. Her mother sighed dramatically. "You're being too emotional. This is not the time for this." "No," Madison said, her voice low and firm. "I'm not being emotional. I'm being rational. I'm not letting you manipulate me or Grandma any longer." And that was when she saw it. Loretta, with her meticulous attention to detail, was holding something in her hand. A small box, one Madison recognized immediately. June's favorite necklace, the one she'd worn since Madison was a child. It was old, simple, with a small silver pendant shaped like a starfish. Madison's heart dropped. She watched as her mother subtly swapped the real necklace with something that looked like cheap costume jewelry. For insurance reasons, her mother muttered, seeing Madison's eyes widen. "Just in case anything happens." Madison's hands clenched into fists. This was it. Her parents had never once considered June's needs or well-being. They were using her for convenience, and the moment that hit Madison, she knew she had to act. "I'm going to protect Grandma," she said quietly, but with unshakable resolve. "I'm going to make sure she has what she deserves, and you can't stop me." As Madison turned to leave, her father's voice cut through the silence. "You're overreacting. We're trying to help." But Madison was already walking away, her mind made up. The heat of the marina felt suffocating as Madison stood with her parents, watching the luxurious yacht bobbing gently in the water, the vessel a gleaming symbol of their carefully curated lifestyle. Her mother, Loretta, was already chatting with one of the crew members, offering a bright smile as if nothing were out of the ordinary. Dr. Andrew Lynn, Madison's father, stood stiffly nearby, speaking in clipped tones to the marina manager. Madison's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of the lie in the air, the facade they so desperately maintained. She glanced at her grandmother, June, sitting on a worn bench by the water. Her once vibrant face was now creased with the signs of age and illness. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the photograph of Arthur, her late husband, the one constant Madison could count on in her grandmother's fleeting world. June looked lost, the quiet hum of a song barely escaping her lips. Madison's heart sank, knowing she had promised herself that she would never let her grandmother feel abandoned. But that was exactly what her parents were doing. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Madison asked, her voice steady but laced with an edge of suspicion. "Why are you still over there?" Her mother turned, flashing her that practiced smile. "Oh, we're just handling the last of the paperwork," Loretta said, her tone light. "Nothing to worry about." Madison's eyes narrowed. It had been over an hour now, more than enough time to check in and get things settled. But her parents weren't moving. They hadn't even acknowledged June, who was still waiting, patiently or perhaps just numbly, for something. "I'll stay with Grandma," Madison said, not waiting for an answer. She turned and walked back toward the bench, her steps quickening. When she reached June, she crouched down beside her, taking her grandmother's trembling hands in her own. "Grandma, we're going to get on the boat in just a bit," she said gently, but the words felt hollow. June didn't respond, her eyes distant as if the world had faded out of focus. The hum of her song was soft and almost melodic. It broke Madison's heart. Then something caught her eye. A flash of movement at the marina office. Her parents were nowhere to be seen. She stood up, her pulse quickening, and hurried back to the building, pushing through the door and scanning the room for any sign of them. The marina clerk looked up from his desk, unfazed. "Excuse me, I was wondering if my family had checked in," Madison asked, trying to keep the anxiety from her voice. The clerk didn't even need to check the computer. "Oh yes," he said, glancing at the screen. "They checked in and boarded the yacht about 15 minutes ago." Madison froze. Her parents had already boarded. Without her, without June. The words barely registered as she bolted out of the office, her heart pounding. She pushed through the crowd of people, not caring about the strange glances or the whispers as she made her way back to the dock. She could feel her chest tightening, a knot of anger and disbelief spiraling within her. She had to find them. She had to confront them. When she reached the dock, the reality hit her full force. Her parents had left. They hadn't even cared enough to say goodbye. They had used the trip as a cover to abandon June, leaving her to sit there alone, confused and forgotten. Madison felt a surge of panic as she turned toward the bench. Her grandmother was still there, looking more fragile than ever. "Grandma, we need to go," Madison said urgently, but June didn't respond. her hand still clutching the photo. She was lost in her memories, and Madison wasn't sure if she could bring her back. She looked up at the Marina clerk again, her voice tight. "Are you sure they left?" she demanded, the words coming out more harshly than intended. The clerk nodded, glancing at the boat in the distance. Yes, they boarded, all set for departure. Madison's stomach dropped, and in that moment, she felt the weight of betrayal more acutely than ever before. Her parents, the people who had always preached about family, had just chosen convenience over compassion. June wasn't worth the effort to them. She was nothing but a burden, easily left behind. Without thinking, Madison grabbed June's frail arm, gently but firmly. "Come on, Grandma," she said, her voice steady but broken. She helped her grandmother to her feet, pulling her away from the bench. The marina felt like a maze as they walked, the world spinning around her, but all Madison could focus on was the reality that her parents had abandoned them. It wasn't the first time she had felt like an afterthought in her family's life, but this was something different. This was deliberate. Her eyes burned with unshed tears as she led June toward the parking lot. She wasn't sure what she would do next, but there was no turning back now. She had to protect her grandmother. She had to make sure no one ever made her feel like this again. Madison's steps were brisk as she helped June toward the parking lot, her pulse pounding in her ears. The weight of what had just happened seemed to press down on her chest, suffocating her with each passing second. Her parents had abandoned her grandmother, left her to sit on a bench, forgotten, while they sailed off into their picture-perfect lives. Madison clenched her jaw, a mix of anger and disbelief bubbling inside her. She had always known her family was far from perfect, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. June had been treated like an inconvenience, like a relic to be discarded when it no longer served their needs. "Grandma," Madison whispered, guiding her carefully along the path. "We're leaving. We're getting out of here." The sound of footsteps behind her stopped her cold. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The voice that followed confirmed her worst fears. "Madison, where do you think you're going?" Her mother's voice was shrill, laced with irritation, as if Madison had somehow overstepped. Loretta appeared at the edge of the dock, her face flushed with a mix of frustration and confusion. Dr. Lin, his jaw clenched, followed closely behind, his expression hardening the moment he saw Madison with June. Madison turned to face them, her eyes hard and unwavering. She wasn't going to back down, not this time. "Where are you going?" her mother repeated, as if she couldn't fathom why Madison would defy her. "I'm taking Grandma," Madison said, her voice steady. "She doesn't belong here, not like this, not with you." Dr. Lin's face darkened with anger. "Madison, this is ridiculous. You're making a scene. June needs real care, and you're not equipped to handle her." "I'm equipped enough to know when she's being used as a prop in your perfect little plan," Madison shot back, her fists clenched at her sides. "I don't care about your yacht trip or your image. You left her. You left her behind without a second thought." Her father's jaw tightened as he took a step forward. "You're being emotional. This is about what's best for your grandmother. You don't understand, Madison. We're doing what's necessary." "No," Madison said, her voice rising with fury. "You're doing what's easiest for you, what makes your life more convenient. But you know what? This isn't easy. This isn't easy for Grandma, or for me. You're not fooling me." Loretta opened her mouth to retort, but Madison cut her off. "You left her," she repeated, her voice low but powerful. "That's the truth. And now, I'm going to take care of her. You don't get to make her feel invisible anymore." A silence hung heavy in the air as the weight of Madison's words settled between them. For a moment, her parents didn't know what to say, the shock of Madison's defiance hanging over them like a storm cloud. Finally, her father spoke, his voice tight with frustration. "You're making a mistake, Madison. You're overreacting. This is about your grandmother's well-being." Madison shook her head. "No, this is about control. You've been controlling everything about this family. You think I don't see it? You think I don't know how you've been treating Grandma, how you've been erasing her, little by little?" Her father's face was a mask of calm fury. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't understand the pressures we face, the responsibilities we have." "Then let me make it simple for you," Madison shot back. "I'm not going to sit here and watch you manipulate her any longer. I'm taking Grandma, and I'm leaving. You don't get to do this to us anymore." Without waiting for a response, Madison turned on her heel and began walking toward the parking lot, June in tow. She didn't look back. Her father called after her, his voice seething with anger. "You'll regret this, Madison. Think about your future. Think about your reputation." But Madison didn't need to think. The choice had already been made. She wouldn't let them destroy the last shred of dignity her grandmother had left. They had chosen convenience over compassion, and now it was time for Madison to choose something else. She walked away, determined and resolute, leading June to the parking lot, where she hailed a rideshare. As the car pulled away from the marina, the weight of what had just happened finally hit her. But she didn't feel regret. She felt free. The train ride to Montana was long, but it gave Madison time to reflect. The soft clatter of the train's wheels against the tracks was oddly soothing, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the tightness in her chest ease. The chaos of the marina, her parents' betrayal, the weight of what she'd left behind. All of it seemed to blur as the countryside unfolded outside the window. June, sitting beside her, was quieter than usual. Madison kept her hand on her grandmother's, offering whatever comfort she could, even though she wasn't sure June understood much of what was happening. The train stopped in a small, dusty town where the land stretched endlessly in every direction, the sky a wide, open canvas. Madison helped June out of the car, taking a deep breath of the cool, earthy air as they walked through the station, its wooden beams weathered by time. Waiting at the platform was Violet, her estranged younger sister, who greeted them with a wide smile and a homemade sign that read, "June and Maddie." The familiar face, the soft smile, and the kindness in Violet's eyes brought a surge of relief to Madison's chest. "Vi," June whispered softly, her voice thick with the hint of a memory. Madison's throat tightened as she watched the brief flash of recognition in her grandmother's eyes. The moment was brief but potent. The woman who had cared for Madison when she was a child, who had taken her on adventures, who had taught her to feel, was still there, buried beneath the layers of confusion and dementia. Tears welled up in Madison's eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the knot in her stomach loosen. Violet, always the calm, steady one, stepped forward and embraced June gently, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We're home now, June," Violet whispered. "You're safe here." Madison could hardly hold back the flood of emotions. She was finally doing the right thing, taking her grandmother to someone who truly cared for her, someone who wasn't motivated by image or convenience. As Violet led them to the car, Madison felt something in her shift. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time, she felt like she was heading towards something real. Violet's farm was as peaceful as the train ride had been, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. The quiet hum of nature filled the air, and the sense of space was overwhelming. There were no skyscrapers, no bustling crowds, just open land and the soft sound of birds calling overhead. The house was cozy, with a warmth that Madison hadn't realized she'd been missing. It smelled of fresh herbs and wood, and June's old leather bag, now gently cradled in the back seat, seemed to belong here, just as she did. Madison felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. For the first time in years, she felt like she was finally doing something right. She had chosen to protect the person who had shown her love when her parents couldn't or wouldn't. That night, as Violet made dinner, Madison helped June settle into a guest room with a view of the fields. The room was simple but warm, with soft linens and photographs of Violet's past life as a wildlife vet, now a quiet part of the farm's history. After dinner, as Violet and Madison sat outside, the sky bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Madison realized just how far she'd come from her old life. She was no longer the obedient daughter who had walked in lockstep with her parents' expectations. She wasn't the invisible child, striving for perfection. She was someone who had finally stepped into her own. Someone who had made a choice to do what was right for her and for June. Violet smiled at her, the faintest hint of pride in her eyes. "I'm glad you came, Maddie. I know June will be happy here, and so will you." Madison looked at the vast open land stretching before her. The uncertainty of the future still lingered, but it didn't feel as daunting. With June safe, with Violet's quiet support, Madison finally felt like she could breathe. She smiled back, something warm and genuine spreading through her. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I'm going to be okay." Life on Violet's farm settled into a peaceful rhythm. The land stretched out before them, vast and open, with fields of green grass and rows of crops under the endless sky. It was a world of simple routines and quiet moments, far removed from the chaos of Madison's past life. It had taken a few weeks to adjust, but with each passing day, she felt herself becoming more grounded. More at ease, Madison helped with chores around the farm, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, and tending to the vegetable garden. It was hard, honest work, but it felt right. There was no need to impress anyone here, no need to play the perfect daughter or wear the right clothes. The only thing that mattered was the land, her grandmother, and the sense of purpose she was beginning to find again. Violet had a gentle but firm way with everything, whether it was caring for the animals or tending to June's needs. She had been a wildlife vet before retiring to the farm, and now she helped Madison navigate the often delicate care required for June, whose dementia progressed in fits and starts. Each day was a mix of clarity and confusion, but Violet taught Madison techniques to help her grandmother feel safe, to ease the disorienting episodes when June would forget where she was or who she was with. Madison took to it quickly, finding a sense of purpose she had never felt before. It was a far cry from her old life in Newport Beach, where she had been the dutiful daughter, the one who met everyone's expectations but never her own. Here, she could focus on what really mattered, caring for June, building a life that wasn't defined by her parents' expectations. June had moments of lucidity, moments where she recognized Madison, where her eyes would brighten as she remembered something from their past. One morning, after sitting in the sunroom watching birds outside the window, June turned to Madison, her voice soft but clear. "You're Maddie," she said, her hands trembling as she reached out to her granddaughter. "Yes, Grandma, it's me," Madison replied, her voice thick with emotion. She hadn't heard June say her name in months, and the sound of it was a small but powerful gift. June smiled faintly. "I remember the stars, Orion's belt. You taught me that." Madison's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how much she had missed these moments, the simple ones where they could just be together, where June was the warm, adventurous woman who had shown her the wonders of the natural world. Over the next few weeks, as Madison settled into this new life, she began to rediscover parts of herself she had forgotten. She enrolled in a remote occupational therapy course, something that had always intrigued her but never felt like the right time for, especially under the pressure of her parents' expectations. Now, with June to care for and Violet to guide her, Madison found herself drawn to the idea of helping others who were dealing with dementia and caregiving in the same way she was. She started journaling again, something she hadn't done since she was younger. Her thoughts, her feelings, everything poured onto the pages. She wrote about June, about their memories together, about the things she'd learned since arriving on the farm. She wrote about the ocean, about the constellations, about the way June's gentle spirit had shaped her own. And slowly, over time, the words turned into stories. Stories she hadn't told anyone, not even herself, in years. In the quiet, Madison found her voice again. The steady hum of farm life, the soft breeze, and the sound of June's breathing as she slept in the room next door gave her the space she needed to reconnect with herself. The anger she had felt toward her parents slowly faded into a quiet resolve. She had made the right choice. This was where she was meant to be. And in the early mornings, when she would sit with June and watch the sun rise over the farm, Madison found a sense of peace she had never known. It was a peace built on the quiet love of a woman who had given her everything, and a new life that Madison was slowly but surely starting to build for herself. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. Madison woke to the quiet murmur of birds outside, the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, as though nothing could disrupt the stillness. But when she turned to look at June, sitting by the window, everything shifted. June was still, her hands resting gently in her lap, the hand-woven quilt wrapped around her like a cocoon. Her eyes were closed, a soft, serene smile on her face, as if she had peacefully drifted off to sleep. Madison's breath caught in her throat. She stood slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She crossed the room in a daze, kneeling beside June's chair. Her grandmother was gone. Her fragile body had finally succumbed to the slow, inevitable decline that had been pulling her away from Madison for months. For a few moments, Madison didn't know what to feel. Her hands trembled as she reached out, taking June's cold hand into her own. She whispered her grandmother's name, but there was no response. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the outside world, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside Madison's heart. "I'll carry it all," she whispered quietly to June, her voice thick with emotion. Her promise had been fulfilled. She had kept her word, stayed by her grandmother's side, and now June was at peace. The sting of loss hadn't quite hit yet, but Madison could feel it, deep in her chest, like a weight she wasn't yet ready to carry. The tears came slowly, quietly. She didn't sob. There was no wail of grief, no outburst. Instead, she simply held June's hand, letting the moment settle around her. A sense of calm washed over her, mingled with the quiet ache of saying goodbye. This wasn't a painful parting, it was a soft one. The kind that made her feel that maybe, just maybe, June had been waiting for this moment, had known it was time. After a while, Madison stood and stepped outside, letting the fresh morning air fill her lungs. The farm was peaceful, as it had been every day since they arrived. There was no rush, no deadline, no looming expectations. The quiet of the land, the rustling of leaves, and the chirp of the birds felt like a comforting embrace. This was home now. As she stood outside, Violet came to join her. There was no need for words at first. The two women simply stood together, watching the fields stretch out before them. Then Violet spoke softly, her voice understanding. "You've done well, Maddie. You kept your promise." Madison nodded, wiping away the tear that had slipped down her cheek. She turned to Violet, the weight of her grandmother's passing still fresh. But there was something else too, something that had started to grow inside her. It wasn't just grief, it was also gratitude. Gratitude for the time they had together, for the love and the memories. Gratitude for the peace June had finally found. They buried June beneath the sycamore tree by the pond, a place June had loved. Violet had helped Madison pick out the perfect spot, one with a clear view of the horizon and the open fields. There, beneath the sycamore's sprawling branches, they laid June to rest. It was a simple ceremony, a quiet goodbye. No one but the land and the birds to bear witness to the final chapter of June's life. Madison didn't call her parents. She didn't want them to know. They had never cared to be part of June's life in the way Madison had. This wasn't for them. It was for June, for the woman who had given her everything and never asked for anything in return. Later, as they sat by the pond, Violet handed Madison a letter. The paper was old, frayed at the edges, but the words inside were clear and precise. It was June's will, her final thoughts, her love for Madison, and her last wish. She had written it before her memory had fully declined, and it was clear now why June had been so intent on taking care of her legacy. "You're her legacy, Maddie," Violet said softly, watching as Madison read the letter. The words in the letter were simple, but they hit Madison like a wave. June had named her the one to carry on her legacy, to keep the stories, the love for the ocean, the lessons about the stars alive. June had left her everything, her house, her savings, and most importantly, her journals, the things that mattered. Madison held the letter close to her chest, feeling the weight of it. "I'll carry it all, Grandma," she whispered again, the promise once more settling in her soul. The tears came now, but they weren't the same as before. They were tears of release, of acceptance, of letting go, and at the same time, holding on to everything June had given her. Violet's presence beside her, the quiet of the farm, the gentle rhythm of life around them. It all felt like the beginning of something new, something real. The heaviness of her old life, the pressures of her parents, the expectations she had lived under for so long had begun to lift. She didn't need their approval anymore. She didn't need to prove anything to them. Madison had found her own path, one that was hers alone. She had finally found a place where she could be herself, a place where she could carry the memories, the love, and the lessons of her grandmother with pride. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had everything she needed now, the love she'd given, the promise she'd kept, and the family she had chosen. Madison stood at the gates of her childhood home, the place where she had grown up under the rigid expectations of her parents. The pristine lawn stretched out in front of her, the house towering in its perfect symmetry. It was all still exactly as it had been, a picture of wealth and polished perfection designed to impress. But Madison knew better now. She knew what lay beneath the surface, what her parents had been hiding, and what they had taken from her in June. The weight of June's death still hung heavy in her chest, but now there was a sense of clarity. She was no longer the same person who had left this house years ago. She had carried June's legacy, just as promised. And now it was time to settle the past. She took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Her heart thudded in her chest, but there was no hesitation. Her parents, Dr. Andrew Lynn and Loretta, had done enough. Madison had done more than enough for them. The door opened, and there they were, her mother, perfectly put together as always, and her father, his stern gaze barely concealing his surprise at seeing her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They both seemed frozen, unsure of what Madison's presence meant. "Madison," her mother said, her voice a mixture of surprise and forced politeness. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Madison replied, her voice firm. She wasn't here to fight or to explain herself. She was here to make one thing clear. Her father stepped forward, his lips tight. "I'm assuming you've come to make amends, to apologize for the scene you caused at the Marina." Madison's eyes flashed with irritation. "I'm not here to apologize. I'm here because you need to know the truth. I'm not your obedient daughter anymore. I don't live in the shadow of your expectations." She reached into her bag and pulled out the documents she'd brought, the updated will that June had left behind. "This is June's will," she said, handing it to her father. "She left everything to me." Dr. Lynn's eyes widened as he looked at the papers, a brief flicker of disbelief crossing his face before it quickly vanished. "She left you everything?" he asked, his tone flat. "Yes," Madison replied. "Her house, her savings, everything she had. She chose me." Her mother's eyes narrowed, the thin veneer of politeness slipping. "You think you deserve that?" Loretta sneered. "She was family. She was supposed to be with us, and you—" "I'm her legacy," Madison interrupted, her voice calm but resolute. "Not you. You didn't see her. You didn't care for her the way she deserved. You never did." The air in the room seemed to thicken as Madison's words sank in. She didn't need to explain any further. The truth was there in the will, in the years of neglect, in everything that had happened between them. June had made her choice. "I never wanted her money," Madison continued, her voice softening just slightly. "But I will not let you erase her. I won't let you erase me." Her father stood frozen, staring at the will as if it were a betrayal. His disappointment was palpable, but Madison felt no remorse. "I did what was right, Dad. I kept my promise to Grandma. She's gone now, and I'm carrying on her legacy." There was silence. Loretta was the first to speak, her voice almost a hiss. "You've thrown away everything for this— for her? For that?" Madison's expression hardened. "I've thrown away nothing. You never understood her. You never understood me." Her father's voice dropped, cold and firm. "You've made a fool of yourself, Madison. You're throwing away your family. This is not the way we raised you." Madison met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "You didn't raise me. You controlled me. You never gave me a chance to be who I truly am. But I'm done. I'm done trying to live up to your expectations." She turned toward the door, ready to leave, but her mother's voice stopped her. "Madison, you can't just walk away like this. Come back home. We'll fix this. You belong here. You always have." Loretta's voice was desperate, the cracks in her facade too clear to ignore. Madison paused, but only for a moment. She glanced back, the weight of everything settling in her chest. Her parents were asking her to return, to comply with the image they had crafted for her. But she had already done that. She had already been there. "No," she said, her voice firm and final. "I already did." With that, she walked out the door, leaving her parents in their world of illusion.